Throughout my life, I've faced many challenges. I've experienced war, lost loved ones, and witnessed unimaginable pain. Yet nothing ever hurt as much as the nightmare that began that morning. When the phone rang, I heard that my daughter Ava was weak, injured, and lying in a hospital bed. What I discovered next was even worse. My family had been attacked by one of the people I trusted the most. I couldn't forgive this betrayal, and I was determined to make those who harmed my family pay. This is my story, and it would be the end of their mistakes. I've always been a disciplined man. My mornings followed a routine: coffee, the newspaper, and a few minutes of silence before heading to work. But that morning was different. My coffee was burnt and I couldn't focus. It felt like something was about to go wrong. Then the phone rang. The sound broke the uneasy silence, and when I saw the unfamiliar caller ID, I answered. A cold, emotionless voice came through. "Mr. Walker, your daughter Ava is in the emergency room." At that moment, I don't remember which emotion hit me hardest: panic, anger, or fear. All I know is that I grabbed my coat, rushed out the door, and jumped into my truck. Every second on the road brought worse thoughts to my mind. Ava, my little girl, what had happened to her? When I reached the hospital, the lights stung my eyes, but I didn't care. I went straight to the front desk and demanded to know where Ava was. When I finally saw her lying in that hospital bed, my world shattered. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. She kept her hands hidden under the blanket, as if she didn't want to be seen any more than she already was. I sat by her side, holding her hand. Even touching her felt painful, but I couldn't let go. The tears in her eyes broke my heart. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Daddy, I came home early from Sarah's. I heard noises upstairs coming from your bedroom. I quietly went to see what it was. And Uncle Rick." Her voice faltered, but it was enough. 23 years of marriage, countless memories, the home we had built together. It all crumbled in an instant. But it wasn't over. "They saw me," Ava continued. "Rick had his men. They threw me down the stairs, then laughed and drank your whiskey." Every word hit me like a bullet. My wife and my own blood had not only betrayed me with each other, but they had also hurt my daughter and disrespected my home. I stood up, consumed by one thought: they would pay for this. I knew the kind of people Rick was involved with. I had always suspected his shady dealings, and now I had proof. I took out my phone and called an old friend from Kandahar, someone who owed me a favor. "I need everything you can find on Rick Thorne," I said. "And I mean everything." I made a decision. I am Thomas Walker, and I wouldn't stop until I made them pay for the pain they caused my daughter. I may have been betrayed, but I was not the type of man to tolerate it, no matter how dark or dirty things got. I would turn over every stone and destroy the corrupt system they had built. When I returned home, everything felt different. This was no longer the place I had called home for 23 years. Every corner, every piece of furniture reminded me of the betrayal. I went upstairs to our bedroom, determined to find evidence of what Ava had described. The bed was unmade and an empty whiskey bottle lay on the floor. The room reeked of cigarette smoke, something I had never allowed in my house. Their disrespect stung me with every detail. Rick and Eleanor, wherever they were, must have thought they were safe. Eleanor's face flashed in my mind. The caring wife, the loyal mother she pretended to be. She had smiled in my face for years, all while stabbing me in the back. Imagining her in that bed, betraying me, made my stomach churn. Who was this woman? Had I been the only one holding this marriage together? The phone rang. I paused for a moment, then answered. "Walker," I said. "It's time to repay my debt," the voice on the other end said. "Rick Thorne, right? He's into some shady business. Deep in a hole. I'll find what you need, but be careful. This guy has connections." "If he has connections, I have more," I replied. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was my rules now. The next morning, I began to put my plan into action. I needed to know exactly who Rick was and what he was involved in. But first, I had to make sure Ava was safe. I arranged for her to stay with Sarah's family. I wouldn't let her be harmed again. As I said goodbye to her, she looked into my eyes. "Promise me, Dad," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "You won't let this go, will you?" "I promise," I said. "I'll make everyone who hurt you pay." Before going to Rick's house, I reached out to a few of my contacts. I learned about his men, 2 hired thugs, nothing more than muscle for rent. I was ready to take them on. Everything I'd learned in the military would come into play now: But this time the battlefield wasn't a foreign country. It was my home. When I arrived at Rick's house, I could hear laughter and loud music from inside. Rick was drinking my whiskey and partying in my house. I stepped inside, my footsteps quiet, but the rage in my heart was a volcano ready to erupt. I found them in the living room. Eleanor was slouched on the couch, half drunk. Rick stood with a drink in his hand, laughing while his guards lounged nearby, relaxed. The moment I saw them, I held my breath. "This ends now," I said, my voice cold and firm. My words cut through the music like a knife. Rick turned, smirking mockingly. "Tom, welcome home. But it looks like you're too late." That was the moment I acted on years of pent-up fury. One of the guards charged at me, but I dropped him with a single move. The other guard reached for his gun, but I neutralized him before he could even aim. Rick's face turned pale with fear. "You," I said, walking toward him. "You're going to pay for everything." Eleanor screamed, "Tom, stop please." But I wasn't a man who could stop. The heat of betrayal still burned through my veins. "How can I trust you, Eleanor?" I said, not even looking at her. "You and Rick betrayed this family. This is the end for both of you." I grabbed Rick by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "Wasn't it enough that you hurt Ava? Now you're trying to ruin my life too?" Rick mumbled something, but I didn't care. That night was just the beginning of justice. Thomas Walker would forgive no one, especially those who threatened my family. The next day I called my old friend Mac. "You won't believe what I've got," I said, knowing he could hear the determination in my voice. Our conversation was brief but clear. I needed Mac's connections to expose Rick's financial operations. I had to trace every cent he made through his illegal dealings. While Mac got to work, I decided to track down one of Rick's bodyguards and confront him. The moment they hurt Ava, they signed their own death warrants. Meeting with one of the guards was part of my plan. I managed to extract valuable information, confirming Rick's shady activities. I recorded everything. Now I had enough evidence to dismantle Rick's entire world. Finally, I pulled all the evidence together and set my plan into motion. I prepared documents to send to Rick's business partners, clients, and the connections protecting him. These files would reveal the true nature of his dirty dealings. Once they were exposed, there would be nothing left for Rick to shield himself with. By the end of the day, I returned home and went to Ava's side. She was lying in bed, still needing time to heal from her injuries. I sat next to her and held her hand. "It's all being taken care of," I said. "No one will ever hurt you again." She looked at me with the same innocent eyes she'd always had. "I believe in you, Dad," she said. Those words were all the confirmation I needed that I was doing the right thing. Rick, Eleanor, and their entire rotten network crumbled piece by piece. Rick's money and reputation were destroyed. Eleanor disappeared into her own solitude, leaving her past behind. But for me, this wasn't just about seeking justice. It was a lesson, an awakening. Those who tried to bring me down learned one thing. You can't destroy Thomas Walker, because I don't just survive, I bury my enemies.